Good evening, YouTube community. My name is Angelus21241, and I apologize for the long delay. I know it's been a while since I've uploaded a scary story, but I've been really busy and finally got some time to finally do a story of my own. Basically what I've done is I have written a scary story by myself recently. And believe it or not, it is based on Phantasm. You guys may or may not know anything about Phantasm. So tonight, as a token of my goodwill, we're going to be doing two things tonight. The first is that I'm going to be giving a small biography on the horror villain known as the Tallman from Phantasm, and I will be telling a story that I've written based on it, sort of like a fan-made deal. So here we go. The Tallman. Originally, the Tallman was a mild-mannered 19th century mortician by the name of Jebediah Morningside. After years of performing funerals and burying the bodies of those who had died, he began to develop a fascination with any possible connection between our world and the world of the dead. Jebediah's research eventually led to him to construct a machine that enabled him to travel through time and space. After going through the portal for the first time, traveling to a destination unknown, he promptly returned, irrevocably changed, and became who we know as the Tallman. Appearance. The Tallman appears as a tall, hence his name, elderly, elderly, white-haired man, usually posing as a mortician. Subsequent to his transformation from Jebediah Morningside, he has only been seen to wear a tailored black suit, befitting of his assumed profession. He seems to speak only rarely, preferring to instead rely on facial expressions, particularly the raising of one eyebrow, the latter of which has become an icon of the character. Here's my favorite here. Powers and weapons. The Tallman has superhuman strength and has been seen lifting a man or, believe it or not, an entire coffin with only one arm, and with very little effort. He also has been seen to possess telekinetic abilities. He is also able to control inanimate objects and people with only the use of his mind. Despite his mundane outward appearance, any parts of the Tallman's body that are severed or amputated from the whole body have been known to transform into hostile insect-like creatures. The Tallman routinely surrounds himself with various accomplices, ranging from apparently willing humans to resurrected corpses and other demonic creatures. His main source of assistance comes in the form of corpses. This is even weirder, and this is what I like about this movie. He exhumes bodies from graveyards that he already has under his control, and after he's dug up the bodies, he crushes them down to the size of a dwarf. He also removes the brain, and then he reanimates the body. Despite their diminutive stature, these dwarves, known as lurkers, constitute the majority of the Tallman's forces. The Tallman also uses flying metallic spheres. Some people call them sentinels, that conceal within them many offensive weapons, including blades, drills, lasers, circular saws. The spheres, which also have come to be considered the Tallman's signature weapon, they also contain the shrunken brains removed from the lurkers. Though he has been very impossible to kill permanently, he can be hurt, and he does not like cold. And it is thought that this is because the realm he comes from is very hot. and there are some certain sounds that can temporarily immobilize him. Wow. Now that you guys pretty much know about the Tallman, I would highly recommend that you guys check this movie series out. It is very clever, and it has got to be the fucking weirdest series I have ever seen. Alright, and for tonight's scary story, this is one I wrote by myself. This story is called The Tallman is Real. Starts off like this. Have you ever seen the horror movie series Phantasm? The one with the creepy morticianer called the Tallman? I have, and I would have to say it has got to be one of the most complicated horror movie series I have ever seen. But what if it was all based on actual events that happened long ago? Let me start from the beginning to better explain some of the crazy stuff that has been going on here. It all started as another ordinary day for me. I had just gotten done working the previous day before, and I was just getting ready to enjoy the day off. Little did I know that at the beginning of my day off, it would begin with nothing but terror. Later on during the afternoon, around 12 o'clock, I had just gotten a phone call from one of my friends informing me that one of my other close friends had just passed away. This hit me as a shock. My friend informed me that the funeral was set to be at 3 o'clock this afternoon. I attended the funeral, and the time seemed to move by very quickly. Sometime later after the funeral, I stayed around to help out with cleaning up. All of a sudden, I noticed a black hearse pull up. Out of the hearse stepped a tall, thin man. The tall, thin man had long gray hair. He wore a black suit with a black tie with a red pin attached to it. And judging by the stature of the man, he had to have been at least 6'4" or 6'5". The man looked really familiar, but I shook my head. And it struck me as a sense of deja vu. I have seen this man somewhere before. I just couldn't think where I have seen him. Quickly, I ducked out of sight so that I could get a better look at the man to see what he was doing. The tall, thin man approached the coffin that had already been put into the ground. He stood there and looked at it and had the strangest look. He grinned, leaned down, and then all of a sudden lifted the coffin with no effort out of the ground with no help at all. I stood in shock from the bushes with eyes wide open. No way, I muttered. For I had helped the people bury the coffin by myself. That coffin had to have weighed at least 200 or 300 pounds, and judging by the way the man looked, he had to have been at least 60, and there's no way he could have lifted that coffin by himself. Very quickly, I turned away, and then I ran to the bus stop that was only a few feet away from where the cemetery was. During the whole ride home, I couldn't get the whole scene out of my head. I lay there and tried to sleep. For what seemed a long time, I finally fell asleep. It was then I began to have the strangest dream. I was standing down a plain, black-white hallway. I heard someone begin walking towards me. I turned behind me and looked, and there was the tall, thin man. The man had the strangest look on his face. He began to walk towards me, very long and very slow. What do you want?" I stammered, and began to walk backward. The tall man raised an eyebrow, and I felt an invisible force knock me down. I tried to stand up, but it felt like there was something sitting on my chest. The tall man moved towards me with an evil grin on his face. He stood there and raised a hand towards my head. I sat up in my bed with a jerk and gasped. Cold sweat began rolling down my forehead. After about 15 or 20 minutes, I finally fell back asleep without incident. Later on, about 6:30 in the morning, I got up again to go use the bathroom. Let me find my place here. Here we go. I stumbled back to my bedroom half asleep. It was then I heard a car roll up. Curiously, I peered out my window, and I saw the same black hearse I had seen earlier at the funeral sitting outside my apartment building. My heart began to race as soon as I saw who got out of the car. It was the morticianer, the tall, thin man. He got out and shut the door to his vehicle. He began to walk slowly up the stairs to my building. My heart began to race faster, and I realized that even if he wanted to break in, he wouldn't be able to because the door was locked from the inside. The tall, thin man glared at the door for 1 second, placed his hands on the door, and then ripped it clean off without any effort. He tossed the door to the side on the road, and the glass shattered on the black pavement. He stepped inside and began to walk up the stairs very slowly. With fear gripping me, I began to race over. I grabbed my coat. I grabbed a chair, threw it, and broke my window. I quickly locked the door to my bedroom and then jumped out the window as quickly as possible. I landed on the soft grass and then began to run as fast as my feet would carry me. I ran up to the street where my bus stop was and stopped in shock. The street was completely dead. This is nearly impossible, and this is completely abnormal because normally around this time there was rush hour traffic coming through here, but there was not one single car in sight. Suddenly, I heard the sound of tires squealing behind me. It was him. He had left the apartment building and gotten into his vehicle, and he was coming towards me. I turned and began to run again. As I was running, I just kept repeating to myself, "This is all a dream. I'm going to wake up." I ran to the nearest house and knocked on the door. No answer. The hearse was getting closer. Quickly, I kicked the door open and locked it behind me. I ran upstairs to the guest bedroom and hid under the bed. I listened as I heard the hearse pull up in the driveway, and I heard a car door open and shut. Footsteps began to rapidly approach the house. I heard the door open and then shut, and then, slowly, I heard the footsteps coming up the stairs. I held my breath as I heard the door to the bedroom open, and I saw the long, thin legs of the man in the doorway. He walked around the bed and stood there for a second, and then he walked out. I almost breathed a sigh of relief, at least until the mattress and the entire bed were thrown aside all of a sudden. I turned and looked, and there was the tall man. He stood there, and he had the most ghastly and most evil smile I have ever seen. I tried to speak, but I couldn't. The tall man reached up, jerked me off the floor, and held me off the floor and held me high, eye to eye level with him. And then I heard one of the most famous phrases I heard in the Phantasm movies. He uttered, "It's time now, boy," he whispered. And then he began to walk. He began walking. Out of thin air, 2 long, thin metal poles appeared, and I could have sworn I have never seen them in this house before. Then all went black. To be continued. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the story. I will hopefully have part 2 up by sometime next week. Until then, you guys can go ahead and give me a like if you think the story was good, and subscribe to my channel, and I should have more like this. You guys have a good night.